Right now, President Trump is making his way to Michigan for back-to-back events marking his 100th day in office during his second term.
In a stunning twist, Donald Trump just hit the brakes on one of his toughest trade moves, the 25% tariffs on foreign cars and parts. But this isn't a sign of mercy. Behind the scenes, automakers are panicking. U.S. factory jobs are on the line, and a political storm is brewing. Why is Trump suddenly offering relief? And is it already too late to save American plants? Stay with us, because what's happening now could reshape the U.S. auto industry forever. When Donald Trump first introduced the idea of a 25% tariff on imported vehicles and auto parts, it was pitched as a bold move to protect American jobs. His message was loud and clear. Foreign car makers were flooding the U.S. market, threatening the survival of domestic automakers, and it was time to push back. The tariff was positioned as a weapon, not just against trade imbalance, but as leverage in ongoing negotiations with key partners like the European Union, Japan, and South Korea. The plan was straightforward. By making foreign vehicles more expensive, American-made cars would become more competitive, leading to increased production within the U.S., factory expansions, and more jobs on the assembly line. For Trump, it was a textbook America First strategy. But almost immediately, red flags began to appear. Modern car manufacturing isn't bound by national borders. Even U.S.-based giants like Ford, General Motors, and Tesla depend on global supply chains. A single American-made car might include parts from Mexico, Germany, or South Korea. Hitting all imports with a blanket 25% tariff meant those parts would suddenly become more expensive, even if the final car was built in Detroit or Kentucky. Industry leaders warned that the real victims of this policy might not be foreign companies, but American workers. Rising costs could force automakers to cut back production, delay new investments, or even shut down factories. Several reports predicted job losses in the tens of thousands if the tariffs went through unchanged. And it wasn't just the factories. Car dealerships sounded the alarm too, warning that higher prices would drive away customers. For middle-class Americans already struggling with inflation, the dream of a new car was about to get even more distant. Trump, however, didn't back down, at least not right away. He insisted the tariffs were necessary to correct decades of unfair trade practices. But the pressure was building. Behind the tough rhetoric, something was beginning to shift. Inside the White House, advisors were hearing the warnings loud and clear. If the tariffs weren't adjusted, the very workers Trump claimed to protect might be the ones paying the highest price. Trump's decision to soften the 25% auto tariffs didn't come from a change of heart. It came from mounting pressure on multiple fronts. What began as a show of strength in trade negotiations quickly started to backfire, setting off alarm bells in both boardrooms and union halls across America. Behind the scenes, Trump's economic advisors presented sobering data. The proposed tariffs could trigger widespread layoffs in the auto sector, particularly in battleground states like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. These are not just key manufacturing hubs, they're political war zones, critical to any presidential victory. Losing jobs there could mean losing votes, and that's a risk Trump wasn't willing to take. At the same time, major auto executives, from Ford, GM, Toyota, and BMW, started pushing back more aggressively. They warned the White House that production costs were spiking, investor confidence was wavering, and long-term planning had become nearly impossible. These weren't just polite warnings, they were urgent appeals for clarity and stability. Trump also faced pressure from some of his biggest financial backers, many of whom have strong ties to the manufacturing and dealership industries. They feared a prolonged tariff war would drag down the economy and hurt their own portfolios. With inflation already squeezing Americans and interest rates rising, a price hike in the auto market was a dangerous gamble. So the administration began to pivot. Trump announced a targeted easing of the tariff policy, offering relief to companies that source parts domestically or manufacture vehicles in North America under the USMCA framework. He framed the move not as a retreat, but as strategic flexibility to protect American jobs without letting foreign competitors off the hook. Publicly, Trump claimed, "We're holding countries accountable, but we're also being smart about protecting American workers." But critics saw it differently, as a quiet admission that the original plan was economically reckless and politically risky. Still, the relief isn't universal. It's selective, temporary, and still leaves uncertainty hanging over the industry. Automakers welcomed the pause, but are demanding long-term solutions. For now, Trump has bought himself some time, but the deeper questions about U.S. manufacturing's future remain unanswered. The response to Trump's partial tariff rollback was immediate, but far from unified. Big automakers like Ford, General Motors, and Toyota cautiously welcomed the move. In public statements, they praised the administration for listening to the industry, but warned that relief without long-term clarity still leaves them in a bind. Behind closed doors, many executives remain uneasy. They know that production planning, investments, and supplier contracts rely on predictability, and Trump's trade policies have been anything but stable. For foreign manufacturers like BMW, Honda, and Volkswagen, many of which operate large factories in the U.S., the news brought temporary relief. These companies rely on importing specialized parts, and blanket tariffs would have made their American operations significantly more expensive. Still, many are unsure whether this is a one-time exception or the beginning of a broader policy shift. But while boardrooms may be cautiously optimistic, factory floors tell a different story. Union leaders say workers are confused, even fearful. One week we're told tariffs will save our jobs, the next week we're told those same tariffs could shut down our plant, said a UAW representative in Ohio. In states like Michigan and Tennessee, where entire towns depend on auto manufacturing, rumors of layoffs and shutdowns continue to swirl. For many workers, the uncertainty is worse than the threat itself. No one knows if these policy shifts will actually protect jobs or simply delay an economic hit that's already in motion. As one auto worker put it, "We're not pawns in a trade war, we're people with families, mortgages, and bills." While Trump's tariff relief may have calmed the headlines, it hasn't calmed the industry. The fear of factory fallout still looms large. Trump's sudden tariff relief didn't just ripple through the U.S., it echoed across the global trade landscape. In Europe, where automakers like BMW, Volkswagen, and Mercedes-Benz were squarely in the tariff crosshairs, officials cautiously welcomed the shift. Germany's automotive industry lobby called the move a step in the right direction, but emphasized that temporary relief is no substitute for long-term trade stability. European Union trade negotiators are now pushing for broader agreements that can lock in predictable terms and avoid future tariff shocks. Japan, another major exporter of vehicles and parts to the U.S., responded with similar restraint. While companies like Toyota and Honda breathed a sigh of relief, Japan's Ministry of Trade warned that uncertain U.S. trade policies remain a major threat to global supply chains. They're urging Washington to return to more rules-based trade engagement, not unpredictable, tweet-driven policy shifts. Meanwhile, China, though not directly targeted by the auto tariffs, is closely watching the U.S. strategy. Analysts in Beijing see Trump's move as a sign of political vulnerability. If enough economic pressure is applied, they believe, the U.S. might retreat on other trade fronts as well. That interpretation could embolden China in ongoing disputes over semiconductors and tech supply chains. At the World Trade Organization, concern is growing. Trump's ad hoc tariff decisions continue to test global trade norms, and several member countries have filed complaints or launched consultations. The takeaway? Trump's rollback may offer short-term relief, but it's also exposing the fragility of international trade relationships. Allies and rivals alike now question how much they can trust U.S. trade policy under Trump's leadership. As one EU diplomat put it bluntly, today's relief might be tomorrow's threat. Trump's decision to ease the 25% auto tariffs has created a momentary pause, but not a resolution. If anything, the move has only deepened the uncertainty surrounding America's trade direction and the future of the U.S. auto industry. At its core, the relief is temporary and highly selective. Automakers that build or source within North America may benefit, but those with global supply chains are still walking a tightrope. Many are now revisiting long-term plans, unsure if the next administration or even Trump himself might reimpose full tariffs if foreign competitors don't play fair, as he often puts it. Industry analysts warn that this unpredictability could damage the very thing Trump claims to protect, American competitiveness. Companies hesitate to invest in new factories or launch new models when policy shifts happen overnight. And once production lines move overseas to avoid risk, they rarely come back. For consumers, the impact is still unfolding. While the worst-case price hikes may be avoided for now, automakers are already adjusting. Expect to see fewer vehicle options, more localized manufacturing, and possibly higher prices for cars built with imported parts that don't qualify for relief. Meanwhile, in Washington, the political fallout continues. Democrats accuse Trump of economic recklessness, claiming the tariff threats caused more harm than good. Some Republicans quietly agree, though many are hesitant to challenge Trump publicly. With the 2024 election season heating up, trade policy is once again becoming a hot-button issue, especially in states where factories have already downsized or shut their doors. On the global stage, allies and rivals are recalibrating. The EU and Japan are hoping for lasting exemptions. China is gauging whether this rollback signals softness or simply strategic retreat. And smaller nations worry that U.S. protectionism could spread to other sectors, from agriculture to tech. In the end, Trump's move may have bought him time and headlines, but the deeper question remains: can America lead a global economy while playing a zero-sum trade game? The answer may not come in a press release. It'll come on factory floors, in car dealerships, and at the ballot box. The road ahead is anything but smooth, and for the American auto industry, every turn counts.